Hi, I'm Evaleen from Awesome Ireland, and I'm talking to Nikki Hughes today. Nikki is autistic, and she's also a member of the GRT community in the UK. So today I'm going to talk to Nikki about, I suppose, discrimination. So welcome, Nikki. Thanks for joining me.
That's okay. Thank you for having me.
So, Nikki, I think some people probably don't know what I'm even talking about when I say GRT. So could you maybe tell us a little bit about what that means and how you identify?
So GRT is an abbreviation for Gypsy, Roma and Traveller. Gypsy being a group of people that have always have been labelled that sort of name. Roma people are generally a tribe in Europe and refer to themselves as Roma people, but that comes under Romani too. And then you have traveller, which tends to be the ethnic minority of Irish travellers. But it does encompass showmen, boat people, it's an umbrella term for a lot of ethnicities of nomadic people, basically, and cultures. I refer to myself as a Romani Gypsy, and the reason why I use Gypsy is because a lot of people don't really understand when I say Romani that I'm not from Romania. I'm actually English. I was born in England. And that Romani is a collective of people who came from North India, and it encompassed a lot of tribes within that, and Romani is sort of like a collective name for all of us and our race.
Okay, that's cool. So that kind of explained it really well, because I think a lot of time people don't know. I think I might have thought Romani was Romania as well at some point before I kind of was introduced to the GRT community. And tell me about the word gypsy, because I think I saw somewhere then that some people think it's derogatory and kind of where it came from and that. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
So in the community, the word gypsy, some people are reclaiming that word to identify themselves, and that includes like Irish travellers, Romanis. So a lot of people are reclaiming that word gypsy and referring to themselves as gypsies, but then there are other in the communities who find it really offensive. The word gypsy actually comes from as Romani people, we would say that we were Egyptian, or and that because of our dark skin, we would say that we were Egyptian and we came from Egypt, and that we were kings and queens and things like that. So this is where you get the ideas of like gypsy kings and queens.
Yeah.
And we sort of sort of said that we were from Egypt. So that's where the word gypsy originally comes from, is this reference that we were from Egypt, an Egyptian. But then it became a derogatory term that settled people used to incriminate us, make laws, and it usually comes with an insult, like these gypsies and tramps, and that we're vagrants, and this whole idea of gypsies became a way to persecute us, and it became a term that was used to persecute us. So a lot of people, because of that connection, actually don't like the word gypsy and refer to it as a racial slur. Within the community, whether they refer to themselves as a gypsy or whether they don't and find it a racial slur, the main thing is that people who aren't ethnically
Hard word.
yeah that come under the GRT ethnic groups shouldn't refer to themselves as a gypsy. So that's the main issue that we have, is that people who aren't from those communities and aren't from those cultures or ethnicity referring to themselves as gypsies, and saying I have a gypsy soul, or that because they like to be nomadic, or like even
So kind of like people saying we're all a little bit autistic. We're like, no.
yes.
I get, okay. So
Exactly. So yeah, it's like somebody referring to themselves as going, yeah, like I'm a little bit autistic, or when they did something stupid or silly that they said, oh, I'm so autistic. You know, offensive, it's insulting.
Yeah.
So generally, that's why we just don't want other people to refer to themselves as being a gypsy or having a gypsy soul, because it invalidates our actual ethnicity and kind of makes us like mythical creatures that
Yeah.
other people can claim, and not a actual true ethnicity.
Yeah, and I mean that's I think something we're very aware of is that like how othered the GRT community are. Like, I mean, I've seen just such hatred towards, you know, just people like wishing death on a whole community of people, on children, on traveller children in Ireland. You see comments, you know, terrible. Like, I know, look online, people are all, you know, kind of, there's a lot of comments that people wouldn't say to your face and all that kind of stuff, but it is there, and I think it's so much part of our culture that people think it's actually okay to use derogatory words towards a group of people, you know, and it's really kind of breaking through that racism, isn't it? And like, I suppose we talked, I know you know, we talked before about kind of coming out about your identity as being autistic, coming from a minority. And I know in Ireland, Rosemary is Mon Mosali is doing a campaign at the moment to try for April to try and find an Irish autistic voice within the traveller community, because nobody's coming forward. So do you want to tell us a little bit what that's like, Nikki? Maybe to come from a, because I mean the autistic community is part of so many other communities, and we so many minorities within our own minority, and kind of what's it like for, say, for you to come forward and say it, or people in your community, because I know there's maybe kind of different attitudes in different cultures towards disabilities or differences, you know.
Yeah, definitely. For me in the UK, and I can obviously only speak from my experiences in the UK. I don't know what it's like to be an Irish traveller in Ireland, but I know from my experiences in the UK that it's very difficult to come forward and actually say. I get asked constantly, oh, where are you from? Where? And when I say England, they say, oh no, but where are you originally from? Because of my dark skin. And a lot of the time in that moment, I have the choice to tell the truth, that I'm a Romani Gypsy, and suddenly that person have, you know, discriminatory thoughts and reactions towards me, or to lie and say that I'm from a acceptable ethnicity, like a Mediterranean type of culture and ethnicity. So for Irish people, I assume that that's probably maybe a similar thing, that, you know, the prejudice and discrimination that we face in out in wider society means that we have that choice. Do we actually say that we are travellers, and say that that's our ethnicity, and kind of put it out there, and kind of put our heads above the parapet, because that's what it's like, you know, actually to be very proud of our community and to say, actually, I'm a Romani Gypsy, means a lot of the time you have to deal with that hate, even if it's just micro expressions where someone suddenly was very interested in talking to you. Once they find out who you are, not so interested in talking to you anymore, to people who are blatantly racist and blatantly discriminatory and will say, I hate you and you should all be burnt alive, you know. It's from those extremes. So to actually put yourself out there, especially online, and say, I'm Irish, I'm an Irish traveller, or I'm a Gypsy or Roma traveller, it's very difficult. And then on top of that, to say I'm autistic,
Yeah,
um, it
people don't like us either, you know.
yeah, then to say, oh yeah, you don't like me either because I'm autistic, and then I happen to be this minority that you hate as well. So yeah, it's really, really compounded. It really is a huge thing to actually come forward and actually say, I am these two identities, and you have to really be really, really thick-skinned and strong to be able to do that. And some people aren't, and that's the saddest thing about this, is that they are on their own, and that they don't really have somebody and a community around them, and that can be really, really isolating. You know, statistically within the GRT community, we have huge suicide rates, high suicide rates, and then in the autistic community we have high suicide rates. So those two together are huge statistically risks for us as autistics GRT. So to be isolated and not feel like you have a community and somebody who understands your cultural needs as well as your autistic needs can be really, really self-isolating and affect your mental health. So the biggest thing that I want to do is kind of build a community where people feel safe to be able to do that. And we need to feel that we are supported to be able to come forward and start speaking about these issues.
And so, Nikki, tell me, what can we do? So, I can't, you know, in the autistic community, kind of, how can we do better to maybe make it a safer place for GRT members to come forward or to feel more comfortable? What can we do?
I think the main thing is we're going to be talking about issues about race, about discrimination and prejudice and racism that we face. Be prepared to feel uncomfortable. That's the main thing with this issue when we're talking about race and discrimination. You're going to feel uncomfortable with these conversations, and that's okay. It's okay to feel uncomfortable. It's okay to that's how you grow. You know, I read a great analogy once of a hermit crab, and when a hermit crab grows, you know, they need a new shell, and that old shell becomes uncomfortable. So we need to be okay with feeling uncomfortable, and we're just hermit crabs who are growing into a bigger shell, and that's what we're doing as human beings, is growing. So yeah, be uncomfortable. Then also challenge hate that you see online. When you see people being racist or discriminatory on social media, challenge people and say, this is not right, this is not okay. Because I find a lot of the time when I'm challenging things online, I'm the only person against a tirade of a lot of comments and a lot of insults and a lot of everything, and that can feel like that can break you inside, and the emotional toll of that is huge. So it'd be nice to have people who turn around and go, hey, this is not okay, and you cannot do this, and this is not right. So generally, yeah, and support people of color who are autistics, because there are people, you know, not just in the GRT community, but Black and Asian and any other people who encompass the people of color sort of banner. Promote them and say, you know, oh, this is this person's story, you know, autism isn't just a white male thing. Do you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
as females, we're fighting the notion of the male thing.
You're ticking a lot of boxes, actually, Nikki. I'm like, oh my God.
So, you know, as females, we're fighting the whole notion that it's male. As people of color, we're fighting the notion that it's a white thing. Do you know what I mean?
Wow.
So we're trying to, within our own communities, say, hey, it's okay to be autistic, and it's proud to be in the disabled community. Disabled isn't a bad word. Being autistic isn't a bad word, and it's a good thing. As well as within the wider community, saying, you know, it's okay that we're people of color and of different races, and that it's not just a white thing. So yeah, definitely promote people of color on their Instagram, on Facebook, or anything like that. Any articles they write and they talk about the issues that face them within their own cultures, promote that, talk about that, make it a wider discussion, get behind them, support them. That's definitely what I think would help a lot to bring these issues to light.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And I think that's what, and I think sometimes I think the autistic community is so diverse, you know, and I think sometimes, you know, you're trying to include the trans members of the community, other people, you know, you're kind of like, and it's literally, I think we just need constant reminders that we all need support. And yeah, you know, that we probably don't often kind of consider the minorities enough within our minority. You know, I'm definitely guilty of it, and it's just literally just probably not thinking about it, or not, you know, forgetting, or just needing that reminder. So I think that's really important. I loved your analogy of the hermit crab. That's really cool. And I think, like, and that's what it is. And I think, you know, we're all, you know, we're not perfect. You know, we've all kind of done things because, you know, we didn't know better. And it's okay. And I think, you know in my advocacy, I'm very much, you know, guys, it's not about punishing people for what they did or what they thought. It's just, okay, look, you thought this because, you know, the misinformation, you know, or you heard, or someone told you a story. It's not true. If you acted on it, you know, let's just move on. Again, we just need to move on, because, as you say, so many of us are suffering, and our suicide rates are so high, and our mental health issues, and health problems that come along with all of that, you know, and really all we need is people to kind of see us as human beings, because that is the problem. You know, I think we're just seen as other, as something else. And people think it's okay then to kind of treat you in a different category, or to talk about you in a different way. So, and like, I suppose, what is it like, say, within your own community, maybe towards disability, or, you know, coming out as autistic? Would you find that your own community in the UK are kind of supportive, the GRT community are supportive, or is there kind of internal ableism, or, you know, that I suppose might be an issue?
Yeah, definitely in my culture, there is an internal ableism, and that's generally because within my culture we have always been a nomadic culture and a people, and our access to education, whether that's being on the road due to discrimination, we have like statistically high rates of being excluded from school and things like that. So these issues affect our education. We're also very suspicious kind of culture, and, you know, have explained things, phenomenons in the world in our own little way, in our own little suspicions. So for us, we tend to see disabilities as someone has cursed us,
Okay.
or that we have done something wrong. When we were pregnant, we may have ate something, because in the Romani culture we have a ritualized cleansing culture, and that includes our food. So it could be a case that in our culture some people think that we have eaten something that isn't ethnically clean, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So we tend to see things because like that, and sort of explain it culturally, why my child might have had a disability, or why I'm disabled, because I think that kind of narrative, when you're young, if you're growing up with a disability, you kind of take that in yourself. So then you feel like, you know, that someone must have cursed you, or whatever, that your life is cursed, and that's why you are the way that you are. So the also the access to basic things like the internet and social media means that we're not having the impact of disabled people saying it's okay and we're here, and the autistic community saying it's okay to be this way, you're not on your own. So those things compile into, a lot of the time, culturally have an internal ableism. We're not educated, so we don't a lot of the time understand what a medical professional is saying to us. And as autistic people, we know that the medical profession is very much on the negative, and it's like, you know, so if you're picking up the cues from this doctor that this thing is negative that your child has, you know, that internal ableism, on top of like not being able to be educated, and not being able to have the wide access to the wider disabled positive influx means that a lot of the time there is internal ableism and feeling that something negative has happened to your child. And it's something that I definitely want to combat within my own culture, to say, hey, you know, I'm autistic, I'm disabled, culturally our life is a little bit different than because my husband is my carer, and that's his job. He's my carer. So culturally men are supposed to be out to work and bringing in money. So a lot of the time when they find out that my husband's at home, they're like, oh my God, Shakara. So to say our lives are different, but ultimately I'm a educated, successful woman. I am married, I have children, you know, our life is successful, and that's okay. You know, you might have to do things a little bit differently, but it's okay. But then I find at the same time in my culture that although that we might not understand completely and maybe do things that are ableist, there is also a culture of acceptance of difference, because we're different.
Yeah.
We've always been a marginalized group and out on the fringes of society. So although we may do things that may be seen as ableism, maybe not say the right speech or say the right words because we don't understand that those are wrong things to say, we accept disabled people at the same time. So it's like a double-edged sword. It's two things, you know. So the wider community may not think that what we were saying is PC or the proper words to say or the educated things to say, but at the same time we're very accepting. So we would never look at a disabled person and say, you know, you can't come anywhere near us. You know, family members are still seen as part of the family and still are invited to parties and things like that, and part of the community. But say in the form of autism, they'll be invited to the party. They will always have an invitation, but they might not understand that that music is too loud.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see what I mean? And that child might be struggling with the music, and that they may need a quiet space to go. Do you see what I mean? That's a prime example of like the way that we're always included and invited in the culture and accepted, but at the same time our needs not met. Does that make sense?
It does, absolutely. It does. I think it's kind of the love for everybody is there, but maybe just not the strategies to actually make sure that everybody can be part of the community or take part in things as much. But I think that probably goes for a lot of communities, you know what I mean, as well. I know it is compounded in yours, but also just that view that I think it all stems from this kind of negative that disability is, and we didn't talk about, do you want to talk about your other disabilities and things actually in a minute maybe, or do you want to maybe? Yeah. But you know, again, but that people see it as a bad thing, that again, that like, you know, a straight white male is the norm, and anything that deviates in any way from that is wrong. And we use those kind of words and people kind of go, what's wrong with him? Or, you know, oh, I knew there was something wrong and now my child went for the assessment. Or, you know, we kind of use that word as if it's acceptable. And like, that's really offensive to kind of think there's something wrong with somebody because they're not this. But again, it's been part of our thinking and language and culture, I think, universally for such a long time. And that's what, like, that, you know, disability rights is kind of like, at the moment, it's like we're, you know, fighting to be seen as an equal human. And I suppose, yeah, it's people, to even use your example within your community, you know, it's fine kind of saying, oh, things are autism friendly and things are, you know, inclusive, but really they're not a lot of the time. Or, you know, people don't have the right attitude then to the autistic person in that situation, or they don't know enough about us. So it is kind of, yeah, it's less you know, there's a lot of tick the box exercises I find, or kind of tokenism that needs to improve. But I know before we were talking about even what it's like in London for you to commute. It's just impossible. So maybe, do you want to just talk, before we'll finish up in a minute, but maybe just talk about that for a minute, about accessibility issues, you know?
Oh yes, and and definitely I live in London, so yeah, accessibility is really, really difficult in London. And you think that's the capital of the UK, and disabled people are really struggling with public transport. So, you know, things are a whole lot worse in other parts of the country. But yeah, definitely, you know, commuting with a physical disability as well as being autistic, and generally just for my children, they don't really have physical disabilities, but being autistic, we struggle to actually get by and get round, and to travel through public transport, because a lot of the times, you know, public transport, especially in peak periods, can be extremely busy. And there's a mass of people, and a lot of the time, people aren't considerate of one another, let alone somebody with a disability. So it's very, very difficult to actually get a seat or to have the spaces that are available on public transport for disabled people. So the wheelchair spaces on tubes or trains or on buses tend to be full of mothers in buggies, or people, some say on the trains or on the tubes will have fold up seats in those spaces, and a lot of people would just sit in those spaces and not really get out the way when a wheelchair user gets on. A lot of staff members, because ultimately those people on the public transport are also paying customers, so a lot of the time they leave it to you as a disabled person to challenge these situations where someone maybe will refuse to get out the area, or mothers with buggies, things like that. They will leave you as a disabled person to challenge that. It's very difficult as an autistic person to make that confrontation, especially for someone like me. When I'm in a state and heightened anxiety, I tend to go non-verbal. So it's very difficult for me to express that in that moment that I'm feeling like, you know, that I'm on the edge of a meltdown, or I'm actually, you know, going to have a meltdown. It's very difficult for me to express my needs and my wants in that moment. So it's very challenging when you're in that situation, and as an adult to have a meltdown is very problematic, because a lot of people will, you know, will call the police and they won't really understand. A lot of people, even the police, have in their mind this autistic child having a meltdown in a supermarket. They don't really have this idea of an autistic adult who might be having a meltdown, or the notion of an adult being non-verbal during a meltdown and things like that. So I find it very difficult to live in a very overcrowded place as an autistic person and physically disabled. You know, the situation right now with the coronavirus, you know, the UK have said that autistic people and people with learning disabilities are allowed to go out 3 times a day rather than just that 1 time a day. Unfortunately for me, where I am, everybody is going out all through the day and it's extremely busy. So for me and my 2 children, we don't have that space to go out 3 times a day. And both my children have ADHD on top of being autistic. So us being stuck inside, we have no outdoor space. We're in a flat and we have no outdoor space at all. So for us being cooped up in this flat during the coronavirus, not being able to leave the house, generally because everybody else is also outside and it's extremely overcrowded, and there's not really a time where we can go out and there's not people around, is really, really difficult. So trying to weigh up all this all the time, that actually in London we have more access to services, and maybe we'll get better services because a lot of the time services is our postcode lottery, but then at the same time, we have to deal with the overcrowdedness and busyness and the lack of access that goes along with being in a very, very overcrowded place where everybody is bustling for the tiny little space that is London.
Yeah.
So it can be, yeah, a very difficult thing to manage a lot of the time.
Yeah, that sounds very tough, Nikki. Like, because I'm living in the country, so you know we're very lucky, and I appreciate. I don't think I could cope in a city, to be honest. But we're very lucky because we can get out. And I just actually think every day with people who can't. And even that, I suppose, yeah, to give a directive that, oh, you can go out like 3 times a day, but not to facilitate this, is kind of going back to being invited to the party, but no one, you know, thinking about the music being too loud. But again, just that lack of awareness and understanding, I think, is there about us, you know. Nikki, I'm going to finish up because but just before we go, can you tell you to give us you have a blog, so how can people kind of find out more about you and follow what you're doing?
So I have a Facebook page called Autistic Life in Motion. I also have a Instagram, which I'm actually more active on, called Autistic Life in Motion. And I have a Twitter called Nikki Hughes. Yeah, I think it's Nikki Hughes 87 is my Twitter. But generally I'm more active on Instagram and talk a lot on Instagram, and sort of share. It's Autistic Life in Motion came from the notion that, like, with me and my 2 children, you know, this is our daily lives. You know, this is just, as autistic people, as somebody who's disabled, as a Romany Gypsy, this is kind of a little look into our lives and us talking about our experiences, and what we kind of face, and, you know, yeah, just generally what our lives, what we live through. Because I really wanted to give this viewpoint of an autistic family, you know, because I'm a mother, and I have children, and I wanted to give this viewpoint that I feel in my house as autistic people, and my husband and my eldest son being neurotypical, how we work, we manage. I feel like, you know, I really want to say to people, you know, it's not that hard, and you can have this life. It's just small little accommodations that is made here and there, just understanding, just communicating with each other. You know, I just really want to show that, you know, you can still have fun, things are great, you know, meltdowns aren't a part of our being autistic, they're not a part of our everyday life. This, you know, it's something that comes from us experience sensory overload. So, you know, to show people, you know, my sons aren't melting down, I'm not melting down every day or every second of the day, you know, because we are able to manage each other and support each other and love each other, and accept each other for every part of our needs, you know. Also, to give another side of the coin, I'm a mother bringing up a neurotypical child. That's so, you know, with parents who go, I don't understand my autistic child, I don't understand my neurotypical child. So,
support group for you? Yeah, I don't see any support groups for neurotypical kids, you know. But you know, again, that's really cool. Do you know what? I think we'll have to have another chat actually about parenting. I think that would be really cool to do that in a little while. We might do that again. So Nick, thank you so much. We're definitely going to do that. I'd love to hear more. This is really, because actually it's something I've never thought about. That's really cool. We'll say goodbye. Thank you so much for talking to me today, and I'll catch up with you again soon. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for having me.